Recording in progress.
All right. Thank you, folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from whichever locations you are in. And welcome to the Kubevela community meeting. I know Srijit and Brian have some updates, so I'll start with them. And before that, we have some nominations I've made for community maintainership for Brian and Jerome. Would love if you guys could upvote that in the community issues. But beyond that, that's part of the community work that we're doing. But then let's start with Srijit. Floor's yours.
Thank you, Anup. So we had published an agenda. The first one is with respect to the Kubernetes and Go upgrades that we have done recently in Kubevela. Amit is here from the team who did this, guided by Kubevela team. Amit, would you want to give an update on that?
Yeah, sure. Srijit, thanks. So we had to first map out all the repos in the Kubevela org, essentially even taking those that are forks of forks. But at this point, we have updated Go to 1.23 across all those repos and Kubernetes to 1.31.10, the patch version, if I remember correctly. And sorry, it has been merged to even main branch master branch in the Kubevela. So the most important repos, workflow, Kubevela, Vela UX, all of them are updated. I think it's just a matter of tagging now. So we should be good to go. We have also actually added some upgrade tests to verify that this is not breaking any of the existing functionality. So I think we are good to go and say that Kubevela now does support 1.31 Kubernetes version.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Amit and team. My hope and plan is to make a release sometime next week. And if everything goes okay, are there any other PRs, Brian, that I know there are a few that are pending and I wasn't able to reach to them, but are there any PRs that are awaiting merging before we release, or are those okay to be done for the next release?
We have one upgrade PR, but it's more of a test. Yeah, sorry. So I don't think it needs to be tagged. It's a workflow. So I think that wouldn't matter.
Yeah. So Anup, we have the two PRs which Brian has sent across to you for uncoupling the RBAC. With that, I think we are good to have a release.
Yeah, that was merged. That's good. I snuck that one in. We found a last minute, not bug, but a use case
Okay.
we didn't. So that's fixed and it's merged. And that was the last critical thing I think we wanted in. So I think we are good.
Correct. Yeah. Then we are good in a good state to have a new release, Anup.
Okay, that's good to know. Brian, if you don't mind, for the benefit of the community, could you please explain what that PR was about, the RBAC one?
Yeah, I was actually going to share it, but yeah. So basically, the ORBAC change is it's to add ORBAC functionality for the X definitions. So that being components, traits, workflow steps, and policies. So the issue we had was that Kubevela acts as kind of the abstraction engine to your platform, or the API into it, and it offered certain components and steps that kind of broke that abstraction or allowed you to bypass it. K8's object and apply objects in the workflow steps were kind of the standout ones that essentially let you apply any Kubernetes resource outside of the kind of Kubevela componentizing practice. So the ORBAC will now run as an optional feature flagged validation on the creation of an application, and it will do a subject access review of the user creating the application to see if they have the necessary permissions to read the various different definitions that are referenced. And if they do not have access to those definitions, it will block the creation of the application. And that means that you can more safely run Kubevela with elevated permissions, but control what users are actually able to create and kind of deliver that abstraction layer that only permits users to use Kubevela components and definitions to essentially provision your Kubernetes resources. So that is available in this release. It is feature flagged, as I say. The documentation can be found in the latest, well, will be available in the latest documentation when we release. And yeah, any feedback or issues you see with it, please let us know.
And the primary use case is that for multi-tenant clusters where, we could have a variety of permissions and access controls per user, just using the elevated Vela permissions would allow a bypass, and this would sort of block that bypass.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, just to explain the bug, because it's actually an interesting use case that we didn't originally factor in. So we figured that this was a neat addition to the authentication feature. The authentication feature, for those who don't know, if you enable it, it impersonates the user when the workflows execute. And that's really useful for providing security as well, in that, if user Joe creates an application, then the workflow will execute and impersonate Joe. So if Joe does not have permission to create certain resources at the Kubernetes level, he will be blocked. But then that means that if you want to give user Joe permission to create, I don't know, say a deployment in the cluster, that you have to then give him or back permission to do so. But by doing so, you allow him to bypass the need to create an application resource, because he can now just create a standard deployment directly onto the cluster. So we had this use case where we actually didn't want to give those permissions to create the Kubernetes resources, because we wanted to trust the Kubevela system user to provision them. But in order to do so, we needed to give enhanced permission on what components you can actually use. So in this case, now you can essentially create a deployment component that will be able to create a deployment, and the system user will be able to have permissions to do so. But you do not need to give the user themselves permission to do that. You can just give them access to the definition. Yeah, they're two kind of either complementary, or you can use them complementarily if you want, or you can use them in isolation. And the fix we put in was to enable you to use them independently of each other.
Cool. Any other updates?
Yeah, no. So there's this issue that we wanted to discuss with you with respect to this webhook getting disabled while the Helm upgrades are interrupted. We have raised a issue in GitHub as well. I've posted that in the channel, but Vishal, if you want to bring that up, and we can discuss that here.
Sure. So, Anup, we are facing an issue like whenever we do hem upgrade for the Kubevela, and suppose in between, if it fail for any reason, suppose if the uh, any component definition or trait definition invalid, it basically reset the webhook configuration. So the next time when we apply any application, it just bypass the webhook because the client certificate is not valid. So call doesn't go to any of the webhook, and it directly go to the controller.
Interesting.
So,
Huh.
yeah, so this is actually happening when we try to upgrade and we have a issue with one of the trait definition. So we found that the first time when we are applying it, helm upgrade is getting failed, but pod is not getting restarted or it's recreated. But the webhook is disabled. Then we figure it out. It's not getting disabled. It's just the way it is working. So the way it is working is like whenever we do the helm upgrade, first it create the mutating and validating webhook configuration with an empty certificates, and once the pods are up, Vela pods are up, then it run a pod, actually a job which basically populate the certificate with actual values. But if any upgrade is getting failed in between, the job doesn't run. And now
Yeah.
webhook are in the wrong state in a cluster.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, this is causing an inconsistency, Anu, because the
Yeah,
cluster remains in an inconsistent state.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Maybe, well, I can't think of anything immediately, but what you need is more a sustained approach to looking at reconciling the webhook information, right? So it's not like a one-time thing that happens on the job. So maybe there's a different approach to it.
Uh, Actually, we can use Cert Manager, Anoop. Cert Manager. I mean, if we already have Cert Manager, the users who already have Cert Manager can use that feature by enabling a feature flag. But our thought is that what if we add a Helm annotation to that job which creates certificates? Like even though the Helm upgrade fails, just run this job, kind of.
So that it will update the certs.
Yeah, update the cert so that the webhook will be perfectly working condition, regardless of the Helm upgrade passed or failed.
Okay. And then the next time if I rerun it again, it at least has all the certs correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
This
Currently,
is the workaround that we thought.
currently,
Yeah.
Anup, this hook has pre-install and pre-upgrade only. Sorry, post install and post upgrade only. It has the Helm annotation. So we were thinking if we enable pre-upgrade also before any upgrade, you run the job.
Yeah, I understood. Is there any downside to this? As in, do it in the pre-upgrade, and then is it possible that it could break? Let's say I want to roll back. What happens?
Yeah, and then we are downgrade. Like if we do in a pre-upgrade script and again it failed, now we have a different set of configuration in the certificates and the Vela core pod which is running. So again, the same thing will happen. We have to make sure if we are using pre-upgrade, the Vela core pod will get restarted with those certificates.
No, that's fine. And if I'm trying to downgrade, like rollback, because the newer version isn't working for me, so I want to roll back to the previous version, that should also ideally be supported.
Uh,
Yeah, no. Ideally, yes.
Because you're still, yeah, it's new certs, but it should still work. The webhook configuration should also be updated, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, because it had a post upgrade. So even if we are downgrading, so basically we are changing the version. So it will again run and update the certificates.
Yeah, I would say go ahead and try that out and let's test it. Make sure with a good amount of testing before we raise a PR.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Anybody else have anything? Brian, do you have anything cooking in your labs?
I have the shared CRD issue, which is definitely worth a conversation with everybody. So we've kind of been extensively talking about this all day, between our single book of my single book of Garner earlier, and then it's come up in the our internal office hours. But I put together this pretty quick diagram, so do not judge me on my diagrams. But essentially, we have CRDs across, from what I can see, 5 repos affected. And this also applies to a lot of the definitions. And it causes pretty breaking behavior across things depending on the orders of installation and all sorts of things. So to briefly explain the issue, and the guys can chime in, Kubevela Core has its shards directory and it installs a whole bunch of CRDs. The main ones are these ones the ones infected are in yellow. So applications is sort of fine because they are unique to Kubevela. But packages, workflow step definitions, and workflows are contained in Kubevela Core and will get installed with Kubevela Core. But they are also in workflow. And
Yep.
we don't know if they're being maintained across the 2 repos. And we have certainly no guarantee that they're being maintained across the 2 repos. So it is possible that, we have different versions of CRDs in different repositories. And I think Gakarna have found evidence of unsynchronized CRDs in the repos. So that's issue 1. The other issue is that we then use add-ons to install some of the CRDs. So in the case that you've installed Kubevela Core, you would use the Kubevela Develop Workflow add-on to install the workflow controller. And that doesn't use Helm. It actually installs the workflow run CRD through a queue representation of that CRD. So you're getting yet another copy that may not be in sync with this. And it's even compounded by the fact it's not even in YAML format that somebody's just copied it from one to the other. It's queue. So unless somebody is manually going back to the add-ons every time a CRD changes, which I don't think people are, and running through a YAML to queue conversion, these are not going to be kept in sync. And this is actually worse for definitions, because you can imagine the same kind of setup for a definition. You install Kubevela core, and that puts, let's use the HTTP request because we have actually seen this issue with HTTP requests. So I install Kubevela core, and that installs the HTTP request workflow step. I then install the Vela workflow add-on, but
And you lose.
the workflow step will not be pulled from the add-on. It'll use the one that's already in Kubevela core. But the issue is that our Kubevela core version supports QX, but the workflow controller version doesn't. So the definitions that Kubevela core installed are not compatible in a lot of situations with the ones that the Vela workflow will then try to, with the Vela workflow version. So when they execute, you get all kinds of silent failures and incompatibility issues, which is a really, really bad user experience. I think the request, HTTP request is probably the worst one because as a new entry, as somebody downloading this for the first time, trying it out, you're going to want to see a HTTP request made, and it just kind of silently fails, and you give up on the repo and you go find an alternative. So we kind of need to fix it pretty quick. And then KubeTrigger is doing similar, like you've got event listeners and trigger services. And then really bizarrely with KubeTrigger, the add-on does not install definitions. So if you install Kubevela core and then you use the KubeTrigger add-on, you're actually missing CRDs. So you need to then download this manually and install it to use it. So
It's never working. So it's not working if you just use the KubeTrigger add-on.
yeah, exactly. It's you have to kind of manually install CRD or else it won't work. So that's obviously not great. And then even more bizarrely, because I can't really explain why this is done, but that definition CRD is contained in the PKG repo. But I'm not aware of any installation step that uses these definition like these CRDs when installing. So I'm not really sure what this is doing here. And it also has a copy of packages, which both Kubevela Core and Workflow have. So yeah, like in terms of this, like there could potentially be 3 different CRDs for packages. And yeah, it's very inconsistent. So we
I
we
think it might have been a sort of pull those things out with using package, but maybe it never went all the way. I don't know the history of that either. But I
that
think
is looks like
yeah, so I think we should pick that up. And it's going to be a big one to do for the next release. And I think we'll have to iterate on how we want to do it in such a way that it doesn't cause backward incompatibilities and other things as we upgrade with the other associated repos as well. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing, Brian, you're looking at a design that'll help us get there.
Yeah, we're starting to. So I mean, there's 2 major options. Obviously, the first is like as you touched on, is kind of centralizing the charts and installing the same charts essentially across the different repos, depending on what your installation order is, but making sure that there's only one golden source for these. We've also to fix some of the patterns we use with add-ons, because another kind of issue that we see with this is I can install the Vela workflow add-on, which will be versioned. So let's just use like version 1 and 2 for simplicity. So I can install version 2 Kubevela with version 2 of the Kubevela workflow. But critically, I can actually specify a parameter of version into this add-on, and I can set that at version 1. So they're not actually locking down the dependencies, because I can override the add-on version with a different version of the controller, and that version of the controller may not be compatible with the CRDs and definitions that are being installed, because the definitions of CRDs do not change with the version of the controller that you specify. So that's kind of breaking as well. So we need to lock down that at least for our internal add-ons, the version of the add-on should be the version of the controller that it installs alongside it. So there's some kind of compatibility, and then those dependencies should be captured in the metadata files. So that's an easier fix in terms of just changing our behavior with them. Obviously, then yeah, we need to identify the common ones and pull them out and put them into a common shared location. How we'll do that will work out. Skokarna on our side have capacity dedicated to this, but also fixing the definitions. So we know that there's incompatibilities between a lot of the definitions, especially in workflow steps. So it's on our backlog to review pretty much all the definitions, starting with workflow steps, make sure that they're compatible with both core and workflow, get them all up to date, synchronize the CRDs, and then from there we can go towards taking those golden copies and then centralizing them and installing them in a common fashion. But option 2 is a bit more controversial, shall we say. But let me put it out there because internally there's some kind of rumblings about this, and I think capacity wise it would help. So workflow and Cube Trigger are both really, really amazing features in combination with Kubevela. I don't think anybody's disputing that we need independent standalone workflow executions and we need Cube Trigger features. However, anecdotally, and I've no significant evidence of this because we don't capture the metrics on it, but I would hazard a guess that not many, if any, users are actually installing these completely standalone without already having the Kubevela controller running. Typically, I would imagine most of our users are installing Kubevela Core and then installing the add-ons to go with them. And the question that kind of comes up is, is the maintenance overhead of supporting the standalone versions and having to synchronize all of these repos and the work involved, is it worth it if the standalone features are not being utilized? And if they're not being utilized, is it easier? And I know we have only kind of recently split them out, but should they be merged back into the main code base to simplify the release cycles?
It's a good question. The problem is since we don't have metrics, it will be hard to reason about those
Yeah.
assumptions. But I think nevertheless, let's map out a plan. Maybe perhaps write a cap as well, and see what the community thinks. Work with Fog as well, and see how we'd like to approach this. Let's take a stab. I know it's early days. We'll have to do it in piecemeal approach so that we're not trying to boil the ocean. I think go ahead and work on a plan, and we'll figure out how to get that implemented.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, Brian.
That is it for me. And just in terms of some other features, we're early in investigating, but we will kind of start documenting designs and stuff a bit more. So one of the killers that we find is a lot of the features are very imperative in nature. So we've config and config templates, and we've add-ons are the primary examples where unless you're using the CLI, the features essentially you're able to bypass certain features. So config templates and configs should be allowing you to create reusable, validatable, type-safe configurations. But the type safety only works if you apply through the CLI. If you apply outside of the CLI directly through kubectl in a declarative fashion, you can actually bypass the validation. And I think some of these features are very useful in terms of building out the future of Kubevela, having, building on top of these config templates and stuff for other features. So we want to enable the validations on them to run in the controller as webhooks, validating webhooks instead of relying on the CLI. And also add-ons, which are, in my mind, one of the best features of Kubevela, but there's no declarative way to manage them. So we are in early investigations of whether we could have a separate add-ons controller which manages the dependencies and the installation of the add-ons and would allow you to install them declaratively and kind of better build up nested dependencies and add-ons to kind of build up your cluster's core functionality.
Yeah, I
So
know that was an issue for us as well at Guidewire, where it was not easy to get these installed other than writing a bash script and doing the add-on
there
installation.
is a new workflow step that has it's add-on operation, and it lets you run enable add-on. But behind the scenes, it's actually just executing the CLI command. And the dependencies between add-ons are actually not enforced. So you can install, say, the Flux CD add-on, and then you can install the Crossplane add-on using Flux. But if you delete the Flux add-on first, your Crossplane add-on is kind of left in limbo, because if you try and delete it, Flux isn't running to actually reconcile. So the installation and deletion dependency ordering is not in place. So we need to fix that. And ideally, you could install 20 different add-ons into your cluster as part of your deployment, and it would intelligently upgrade them between versions, but also wait for the dependencies to be in place before installing the add-ons. And in that way, you could have hugely nested add-ons that you just kind of throw onto the cluster and then let the add-on controller work out the installation order, and you should arrive at complete consistency by the end of that kind of reconciliation cycle.
Yeah, the
And
other thing to worry about is the version sprawl that we may have to address by add-ons having different dependency. I mean, same dependencies, different version requirements, and how that would impact each other as part of the DAG.
Yes, yeah, no, 100%. Like, yeah, dependencies and the version compatibility between them and all that kind of stuff. So that would all need to be factored into controller. I have a very early prototype, and it does work, and it makes the installation a pleasure, actually. It's pretty cool. And the neat thing with if you actually have your multi-clustering set up correctly, if you have 20 different add-ons installed and the dependency ordering is all being managed, and the execution order and all that, when you bring up a new cluster, if it matches the topology policy of an already installed add-on, it will actually bring that new cluster up and automatically install your applications and add-ons in order into that new cluster. So hypothetically, you can bring up an infinite number of clusters and have them kind of nearly self-provisioning, which is really, really neat. But you'd need that add-on controller to kind of truly achieve it, because otherwise it's going to try and install all the add-ons in kind of nearly randomized order, and you'll hit issues. So yeah, there's some of the things we're looking at.
I'm excited to see how they pan out. I think for the community as well. So this is a sneak peek into what Brian's been working on, and we'll see them in action as he gets closer. But Brian, do remember to put in the issues and a little more information, and probably write caps that would help us help the community at large understand the issue that we're trying to solve for.
To clarify, though, just the dev experience of is priority one. So these features are kind of like long tail.
Yep.
Fixing the definitions and the CRDs and stuff is kind of priority one at the moment. So.
Yep. Anybody else have anything to add, contribute, or have issues
That's
they'd like
from
to
our end, Anup.
I'm sorry?
That's it from Guidewire side.
Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful day, evening, night ahead. See you guys in the next community meeting.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.